and gentlemen, Mr. Brent Butt.
Hello, everybody. Good morning.
So, Brent Butt was raised in Tisdale, Saskatchewan, and
I'm just going to check your facts as you go through.
okay, so one of Canada's most celebrated comics, maybe?
Sure.
Okay, stand-up comedian.
I like when you say one of, because that could be one of 30 million.
One of 30 million celebrated comics in Canada. Stand-up comedian,
Yes.
television show creator,
Sure.
producer,
Yes.
writer, director, actor,
Yes.
dog walker.
Yes.
Oh. Who's recently completed shooting your first feature film.
That's true.
A detective story called No Clue.
Yes.
And when you were 20, a comedy club opened up in Saskatchewan. You moved to the city there, right? That's where you kind of started. And within 4 months of that first amateur night performance, you were offered a road tour. Is that correct so far?
That's true.
And then after that, he's headlining in Toronto. He's appearing at major festivals. He's acclaimed for his television comedy specials. And then he invents, creates, launches a little show called, I think it's called Corner Gas.
That is the name of that show, yes.
Yep.
Your facts are sound.
How about this? Unprecedented ratings, an International Emmy Award nomination, named Funniest Show on TV by readers of TV Guide, and it goes on to become
I thought you were going to say readers of TV.
Readers of TV, TV readers, goes on to become Canada's #1 comedy, broadcast in over 26 countries, including the US, airing for 6 seasons. And then you create another sitcom for CTV, Hiccups, with your wife, Nancy.
Yes.
And then that's 2 seasons, 26 episodes, multiple Leo Awards along the way. You've got a podcast in the works. You continue to tour the country performing stand-up as often as you can, as you did here at the Banff Centre in October. Of course, we're delighted and fortunate to have him join us in conversation this morning. Good morning, Mr. Brent Butt.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. That sounds terrific. The only correction I would say in there is the podcast thing. I don't have a podcast in the works. I tell people I'm going to do a podcast.
Okay.
That's all I've done so far.
That's what most people say
Basically,
about their
I say, yeah, I'm
podcasts.
going to do a podcast.
Why not just throw that into the mix,
And I
right?
put one sample episode up, and it's been, I think, a year. That sample episode's been up there.
And it's just trending like crazy.
Yeah, it's all the rage.
Let's go back in time a bit, Brett. You're 12 years old in Tisdale, Saskatchewan. You're watching TV. There's a stand-up comic making jokes, and you tell your mother you're going to be a comedian. What does she tell you?
She said, go do it outside. In reality, that's not what she said. I've told that story where that's what she said.
Yeah.
But in reality, in hindsight, I look back at this moment as kind of pivotal because that was the first time I'd ever seen a guy doing stand-up comedy. I'd seen, comedy on TV, sketches or sitcoms or something, but a guy just standing there talking and being funny, I'd never seen somebody do that.
Do you remember who it was?
Kelly Monteith. He was a big comic in the late 70s, early 80s. He was an American guy. He moved to Britain and did quite a bit of work in Britain. He became quite a big dude over there for a while. And anyway, I'd never seen a guy do that, and so I went up to my mom, and she was doing dishes, and I said, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. And she, in hindsight, the fact that she didn't tell me to shut up or that's a crazy pipe dream or something, I think that's the moment for me where it kind of allowed me to pursue my dream, because she was just like, oh yeah, why do you want to do that? And she just kind of talked to me about it as though I were not nuts.
Was your mom a funny one in the family? Was there a source of comedy there for you?
She is very funny, always was growing up, but she wasn't the sole source. Everybody in my family could crack me up. And my mom and dad were both very funny, and in very different ways. My father, rest his soul, was very much a showman, and he was like the life of the party guy and cracking jokes and and my mother was much more understated kind of funny. My mom was very much kind of a, look at the shirt on this guy kind of a person, Holy, look at that hairdo. Very quietly funny.
Right. And 7 kids, right? So
yeah.
The competition to be funny is pretty serious in that house, I imagine.
Yeah, but it was really a matter of entertaining each other. It was really less about competition and more about just cumulative joke building and making each other laugh. We were we didn't have much in the way of dough. I have no idea how my father and mother raised 7 kids on the, $130 a month or whatever he was making, he ran a boiler room at the honey plant. Didn't make a lot of money. And but we never went without anything, and we just had we entertained ourselves a lot.
I have
We
to
only
laugh
had 2
about it.
channels growing up, so.
The stand-up comedy channel and the news, I guess.
That show was a daytime talk show. Alan Hamill had a daytime talk show, which later became the Alan Thicke Show, when Alan Hamill went off to his full-time job managing his wife, Suzanne Summers. After they got married, Alan Thicke took over.
So it always had to be an Alan, I guess.
It had to be an Alan, up until, because then they went to Don Heron, and the show canceled after that. Should have kept that Alan thing going.
Right. What does a comedy set delivered by a 12-year-old Brent Butt sound like?
I don't know. I don't know that I actually ever delivered a set when I was 12. Although, I mean, the thing I related to when I saw Kelly Monteith doing stand-up was I thought, this is kind of what I do with my buddies. When I get together with my friends, if I could ever get them laughing, I would, that was the best moment for me. Or if I could get my brothers and sisters to laugh, because I was the youngest, so anytime you could make your older brothers and sisters laugh, it was kind of validation.
Right.
It was kind of meant you were on the right track.
And so Tisdale's what, 3,000 or so people? Not a big town. I read that you would hang out spend most of your time in coffee shops with your friends and banter all around like that, right?
Yeah, there was a lot of that, just getting together and just killing time. In small prairie towns, people start going for coffee at a very early age, 12, 13. You want to get a coffee? It's inexpensive,
right?
So if you got a quarter in your pocket, you can go get a coffee and then free refills. And so it's, you'll go to a coffee shop and you'll see a couple 13-year-old kids sitting there having coffee.
And how actively, in retrospect, do you realize now that you were kind of working on your skills as opposed to just cracking wise and talking about stuff?
From that moment of seeing Kelly Monteith on TV, it kind of became an active pursuit.
Huh.
Prior to that, so like up to the age 12 or 13, I was trying to be funny to get that rush of being funny. But from that point on, I really started thinking about crafting jokes and stuff, and watching people that I thought were funny, and watching shows that I thought were funny, and kind of asking myself, why is this one funnier than that one? Or why did that work and that didn't work? Or sometimes you hear a premise for a show. Remember when it used to be a big deal, fall television used to be a big deal. That's when all the new shows would come out at once.
It's less, guide,
it's less like that now, right? But in those days, I'd hear premises for sitcoms coming out, and a new show coming out, great premise, and you'd watch it, and it wouldn't be that funny, and I would sit and try and think why didn't that work? Why wasn't it funny? So it became a conscious pursuit.
That sounds pretty sophisticated to be 12 or 13 and already.
You got a head this size. You got to use it for something.
I guess I've read that you would spend hours talking about everything from world domination to the best kinds of socks, is a quote I read about you.
Yeah. We really covered all the topics, me and my buddies, when we would sit and have coffee. There was no topic too small or too grand. They were all given the exact same gravity. Any dinky conversation or any huge, And we really knew nothing about anything, but we would pontificate for hours about stuff.
About what are the best socks?
Yeah.
Did you figure it out?
No, I remember claiming, somebody had claimed that having the right socks was very important and could really change history. And the best armies in the world had comfortable socks. But my contention was Alexander the Great, he and his army had no socks at all.
No socks at all.
And they conquered the known world.
Huh.
So yeah, we would have those conversations for hours. Would go on. And
So from talking about socks, you I think roughly 20 when you moved to Saskatoon and start trying, to launch a career, right?
Yeah, I'd actually gone to. It was kind of a two-pronged attack. A buddy of mine and I had started a comic book. We started. I had an idea for a comic book. I called him up one day and I said, I have this idea for a story for an 8-page filler. A lot of the comic book magazines, not the comic books, but like Conan the Barbarian, the magazine, the Savage Sword of Conan, magazines like that would often have, they would be printed on a web printer, which goes in 8-page increments, and so sometimes they would need an 8-page filler. So they would often have at the back an 8-page story.
Trying to sneak in, I guess.
Yeah, and so I had an idea that I thought, for an idea that I thought we could write and I draw, and we could send it off and sell it to Marvel as an 8-page filler. I called my buddy up and I told him about it, and he was like, that's interesting, yeah. And the next day he called me up and he said, let's go for coffee again. And we sat down for coffee, and he had expanded my 8-page filler idea into something that could potentially go on forever. It was a really great idea for a series. So we knew we weren't going to sell a series to Marvel. So I've always been kind of entrepreneurial. I said, well, let's start a publishing company. And so we did, and we published it ourselves.
You got a bank loan?
We got a bank loan. It was my first big business lesson about undercapitalizing a venture. We didn't get enough money. We were going on the right track, but we ran out of capital before we could get profitable. But that's why I moved to Saskatoon. That was one of the two reasons I moved to Saskatoon, because he was in college there, so he was going back to college. I went with him, and we did the comic book, and I started doing stand-up.
So did you stumble into stand-up even though you always wanted to be a comic, given what you were doing with the comic book idea?
No, I mean, they're two very different things. The comic book wasn't funny at all. It was a science fantasy kind of a thing, real, hormonal 18-year-old, 19-year-old, warrior women, scantily clad with giant swords.
Not funny at all.
Fighting demons. It was all very serious business. But I knew there was a comedy club that had opened up, and so to me it just made sense to be in Saskatoon, do the comic book, and pursue stand-up comedy.
So you had a routine ready,
I had actually done stand-up in high school.
Right.
At like a variety night, drama night. I was always involved in those, any kind of spectacle, any place where there was an audience and you could be amplified. I don't know what neuroses I have that needs to be fed by that, but so I did stand-up in high school. That was my first actual going out, talking, doing a monologue. Yeah. And so I was, I was in the process of preparing material.
So not long from the Saskatoon Amateur Night, you end up headlining in Toronto quite a bit. A few years after that, you're touring festivals around the world. How much of your act is still influenced by the energy, the style you develop in coffee shops in Tisdale?
I don't know. It's hard to say. It'd be weird if I had an actual percentage. 11% is still affected by that.
And 2 cream, 1 sugar.
Yeah, I don't know. It's, I think, I think who you are and your style is probably always going to be influenced by how you grew up and where you grew up and what your environment and your influences were.
Yeah.
But it's that classic kind of, it's nurture and nature combined. There's part of me that, I don't know, is kind of fascinated by comedy and really drawn towards it organically.
I guess what I'm wondering is...
And then I grew up in a situation where I was allowed to kind of foster that, let it incubate.
Just wondering if it ever occurred to you that you had to be a different person on stage, or if it was just you would stand up, metaphorically, you'd stand up from the coffee shop and grab a microphone and just keep going with the conversation.
Well, in the early days of stand-up, I tried a few different things, actually, and the different kind of characters. I used to do this real nervous character, and they worked, but they got laughs, but they weren't fun for me. And for me, being myself on stage, I made the decision to be myself on stage, whatever that was, because it was the most fun, the most rewarding. Because when I was doing a character on stage, I kind of felt like I wasn't getting laughs. I kind of felt like it was that character that was getting the laughs. And for me, everything just became, it was more fun, it was easier when I was being myself. And that person is very much the same guy that was just sitting around the coffee table talking.
So you had a character that I was nervous, but I've read that you don't get nervous before a show.
No, I don't really. Because, for whatever reason, I've always just realized this isn't that important, You go out and you do your jokes and you want to do well, but at the end of the day, there are some important jobs in the world, and being a comic isn't one of them. I never have to go out. If it goes poorly, I don't have to go out and say to a family, I was operating on your child in there, and I had an off day, didn't go well, and your kid's dead, right?
Yeah.
I don't have to ever say that.
Yeah, because
surgeons might have to say that.
Surgeons might have to say. As a comedian, you want to kill, right?
Yes, exactly. You want that. But yeah, it's just, you want to do well, and it's not pleasant bombing. Although sometimes if you bomb bad enough, it can actually, if it gets bad enough, it starts to get good again. You can start to enjoy how poorly it's going. you start to wallow. You get through the part of, oh my God, this is horrible, and you get to the part, oh my God, this is horrible.
You remember a moment where that process happened?
I remember there was a club called the Uptown Club in Toronto where I was doing a show and it just was not going well. And it was one of those nights you couldn't like blame the crowd or anybody. Everybody else on the show was doing great. Every other comic was killing. And I just could not buy a laugh. And I don't know, for whatever reason, it was going bad enough that it just became funny to me.
To you?
Yeah, it became funny to me. Nobody else was enjoying it. And it almost seemed like the funnier that I thought it was, the more resentful they got, the crowd. It was like, you're not supposed to be enjoying this. We're hating you. And that became funnier to me, and it really snowballed.
One thing that did go good enough for you is, I think, Corner Gas. We should probably talk about that a little bit.
Sure, let's dive in.
Set in small town Saskatchewan, Dog River. What motivated you to produce a show about a gas station and a cafe in the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan?
Well, it all stemmed from a little conversation I had with myself one day when I was wondering what I would be doing if I hadn't tried to pursue show business. And I just thought I'd probably be hanging out at the gas station back at home like I used to do growing up. We would hang out. A buddy of mine worked at the gas station. His family owned it, actually, and we would just hang out there and shoot the breeze and talk. And it's kind of the comings and goings, people, characters popping in. They're needing such and such for such and such a situation, or two people coming in arguing. It was just always a nice little hub of activity. And I thought that could probably be my first notion was I wanted to write a movie that took place at this gas station in a small town. And I started writing it up as a movie, and it kind of wasn't working. The story wasn't big enough to hold water, and it really felt like I was forcing it, and it wasn't working as a movie. But what was working was I liked these characters, and I liked the jokes were coming easy. And I thought, I should probably just forget the story and make this about the people and the jokes. Just make it small. So I wrote it up as a treatment for a TV show, like 4 pages, and then didn't do anything with it. And then one day I was approached, hey, do you have any ideas for TV shows?
Well, I've got this thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it was very strange. This is one of the surreal moments in my life. I used to live with my girlfriend at the time, and she was kind of a bit of a pack rat, a bit of a hoarder. And, I can always kind of adapt to my situation. So we lived in a pretty, there's just piles of stuff everywhere. Anyway, I had this meeting about, do you have any TV show ideas? I said, yeah, I wrote this one thing, and I kind of told them about it. I said, do you have any paper on it? I said, I don't know, I'll see if I can find it. So I went home, and I remember, this is exactly how it went. This is why it's surreal to me. I came into the house, and just clothes and boxes and garbage and crap everywhere. And I went in, and I went, God, how am I ever going to find, it was on a floppy disk, 3x5 floppy disk, right? How am I ever going to find that thing? And I moved this pile of clothes like this, and there was a floppy disk there, and it said Corner Gas on it. I found it in 1.5 seconds. The first thing I moved, it was underneath.
Wow.
And I thought, wow, that's kind of crazy. So I put it, into the computer, opened it up, wrote a little more, tweaked it a little more, and then the process was underway at that point.
And just like that, obviously it wasn't hard.
Well, I spent a few days really kind of polishing that treatment, but I had the outline of what the show was.
Yeah.
And then when CTV said, yeah, that's an interesting idea. Let's talk about doing it some more. And we had a meeting around the table and kind of talked some more, sold them on the idea, and they bought 2 scripts. They said, okay, give us 2 scripts.
Yeah.
And I'd never written a half-hour sitcom before. I called a friend of mine, Mark Farrell, who's another stand-up comic, who had written on Newsroom and This Hour, and he had a lot of half-hour TV experience.
Yeah.
So he and I wrote the first 2 scripts together.
It's set in a small town. We're in Banff, a small town. You grew up in a small town. Do you feel like you're being labeled a small town brain with a big city comedic chops? I mean, is there a small town attribute to you that you think is unfairly attached to you or fairly attached to you?
I think it makes sense to attach that to me. I think it's fair, too. I have a rural background, and the biggest story I ever told was all rural. So, but I've never really considered I'm aware of my history and I'm aware of where I grew up, but I kind of don't consider myself a small town kid, because even growing up in Tisdale, it didn't seem right that that's where we were. You know what I mean? I'm not being very clear, but it didn't make sense to me as a kid that we lived in this small farming town. I was like, have you not heard of New York? Have you not heard of Hollywood? There's a lot of big places with fun stuff going on. Why are we not there? And I had a great time growing up, and had great friends, a great family, and played sports, and I just had a great time. But the whole while, I was just kind of really drawn to the notion of living in the city. I wanted to be in the city. It made more sense to me. And then there was, there was part of me that when I found out that I was born the day Lenny Bruce died,
right.
I thought, well, that makes sense. There it is. I'm Lenny Bruce, reincarnated. Only this time I'm going to work clean. But I need to be in New York, right? I need to be in the city.
Yeah, why do you think clean works for you specifically? Corner Gas is a great part of it. What's great is that it's clean and fun, right? And your act mostly is that.
It is mostly. I mean, there's some, as a club comic, the thing I like about doing comedy in a club is that, the audience is there on your turf, and you can do whatever you want. And they can laugh or not, but this is up to you. And I didn't work exclusively clean in the old days. I just worked kind of mostly clean, but anything that I thought of that I thought was, authentically funny, I would do. And sometimes that was hellacious filth. But for the most part, the way my brain works, I don't know. I mean, it's just kind of more, I play with the language more. It's more about playing with the language and finding funny in small things. And, sex is a big, broad topic. And that's kind of not where I'm interested in finding the comedy. I find comedy, I like finding comedy where it doesn't look like there would be any.
Like a coffee shop.
Yeah, I mean, anything that's just kind of, mundane and average and normal is if you peel back a few layers, is rife with comedy. And I enjoy digging in there. That's how I work authentically. That's where my brain works authentically. And I always feel that comedy is best if it's authentic. Whether it's filthy, whether it's clean, is unimportant to me. Right. It's whether it's authentic and original. To me, that's all that matters. Like when people say, I've had people say to me, I like you because you don't have to be dirty to be funny. And I say, yeah, but you don't have to be clean to be funny either. You just have to be funny to be funny. The two they're unrelated.
Do you feel like you can't be dirty anymore?
I kind of get that now because of Corner Gas, and it was really a show that the family could watch together, and I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, that was never my goal. And also people, I don't know why did people go, I like Corner Gas because it was really clean. And you go, well, it's primetime network television. You can't have an orgy. What do you Every primetime network television show is fairly clean. There's some have sexual innuendo and stuff, and Corner Gas had some of that, but it was all, it was clean out of necessity. You weren't allowed to do that. But yeah, sometimes I'm kind of used to it now, but after the first couple of seasons of Corner Gas, when I go out to do stand-up, I'd walk out and there'd be somebody there with their 11-year-old in the crowd, right? And you'd look out and you go, oh, well, I guess I can't do the erectile dysfunction bit.
It just won't sell.
Yeah, so I mean, luckily I'm able to work clean, but there's part of me that feels like, I'd like to cut loose a bit more and and not feel censored as much as I kind of am. But I get to scratch that itch because I pop up at comedy clubs all the time and do stuff. And
we're here in the mountains. You grew up on prairie land. Do you ever wonder about how landscape influences the sense of humor of a place?
Not really. I never have. I wish I could kick that can around with you, but no, I mean, I just think it's different for everybody because, I know other comics that grew up in small prairie towns who have a completely different outlook on things than I do. So, yeah, I mean, there might be some influence there. I just don't know what it is.
One of the jokes I hear you make a lot is how you have a medical problem. You're both lazy and gluttonous. You created, wrote, produced, and starred in Corner Gas. You wrote and starred in Hiccups with your wife. You wrote and starred in this new film, No Clue. Do you really think you're lazy?
Yeah, I have no question I'm lazy. If somebody said, I will send you checks for doing nothing, I would probably buy that deal. I'd go, all right. But nobody will do that. You have to work in this society. Fine. So I mean, I've just chosen to, and I've been fortunate that I was able to pursue a line of work that I really, really enjoy. And so I mean, I'm lazy. I mean, I really, truly am lazy. Physically, I'm lazy. Let's say. If creating TV shows and movies involved a lot of stair climbing, I probably wouldn't have done any of this.
Right.
But you can sit down and do this and think while you have a nice snack. And that's how it got accomplished. The fact that that's the scenario that you can create in was like, okay, I could do this then. But I'm conflicted because, like, the joke of my act, I'm lazy and gluttonous, and that's why I put on weight. But I do have an actual conflict in that. Not that that isn't valid, because that is. There are times in my life when lazy and gluttony are actually battling. I don't know if anybody's ever gone through that, where you're so comfortable, but you also want a sandwich, and you're like, what's going to win out here, right? My sloth or my gluttony? But I'm also conflicted in that I'm lazy, but I'm ambitious.
Right.
So that could create some turmoil.
That battle is probably the most boring battle of you would ever want to watch, right?
Yeah.
And are you wearing all these hats because you have to, or because to work here, or because you want to, because it's inevitably in your DNA?
It's out of necessity, I think. I did some TV early on, and there were valuable lessons learned. And one of the lessons was that not everybody gets it, I remember I did a special, and they had assigned me a director to do this thing early on, and it was really the first kind of building television that I ever did. And I had several things in my mind, the way certain bits would be shot. And then when you saw how they were shot, you go, oh, that ruins everything. And it was a real eye-opening moment that not everybody gets it. Not everybody thinks comedically. Mm. It was beautifully shot. It was in focus. The angles were nice. But everything that made the sketch funny was ruined by the way it was set up and shot.
So it's give me that, I'll do it.
So it was just that realization that, oh, not everybody gets this. Mm. And comedy is, people aren't aware, and I wasn't when I first started, but you become aware how fragile comedy is. By that I mean how easily it can not work, how easily it can go from being something very, very funny to something not funny at all, just because of one tiny little thing. And I just realized that I needed to oversee that. So when I met with CTV, not trying to be like a power mad jerk or anything, I just explained to them that I'm interested in doing this TV show, but only if I can be in charge of the funny. And because everything I just told you, the comedy can be ruined very easily, and I can't afford to bomb on TV. I can bomb in a club on any given night in front of 109 people.
And enjoy that.
And enjoy it because I can get them tomorrow and there's no big deal. But I can't bomb in front of 500,000 or 1 million people because nobody at home is going to watch the show and go, boy, that was poorly edited, right? They're just going to go, that jackass isn't funny. And I can't afford that. At the time Corner Gas came along, I'd been doing stand-up comedy for 15 years. And I explained to them, the only asset I have is that I've built up this notion around the country that if I come to town to do a show, I'm funny enough that there's a certain number of people that will buy tickets to the show. That's the only asset I have. And if this goes poorly, all that goes away. And so I can't afford to let it not be funny at the hands of somebody else. If I'm going to bomb in front of the nation, it's going to be me bombing. So I have to be in charge of the funny. And besides that, if you're not going to put me in charge of the funny, why am I here? You know, I'm not riding my pretty boy good looks. I'm not good at math. I don't know how many lights we need. I'm bringing nothing to the table except funny. So if you take that away from me, really, just hire my cousin. He'll do it for half the price. Yeah. He'll be happy to have a TV show.
Feature film, something you just tried on.
Yeah.
I think you've described it as a old-timey detective story.
Yeah, in some ways it's an homage to old film noir whodunit murder mysteries. I mean, it's a contemporary. I'm not trying to, you know, it's not like Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid where they went back and made an old detective movie.
Right.
It's a contemporary story, but I love whodunits. I love the old film noirs. I love, you know, Agatha Christie stuff, Miss Marple, Hercule Poirot. I love all that stuff. I love whodunits. And so that's what this is. It's comedic. I call it a comedic mystery thriller.
Is there any serious element to it? Have you ever thought about whether that's something you want to tackle?
There is. I mean, the whole point of this movie, I said when I wrote this movie, and when I first talked to people, pitched the idea, I said, I want to write a movie that happens to be funny. It's not a zany, wacky. I didn't want the detective like climbing the ladder and it starts to go back, wah, right? That kind of, it's not that kind of a comedy. I wanted to write a dark, gritty, real murder mystery that held water and was, in and of itself, a realistic, dark, gritty murder mystery. And happens to have comedic elements because the guy trying to solve the case is in way over his head. This is a much bigger thing than he thought it was, and he's just not good at it. So the comedy comes from that. Everything else is very real. And I kind of didn't know if it would work. And there were moments in it where there's jokes inside of an actual very grave situation. I thought, is one going to kneecap the other? I thought it could work, and then when we shot it, I was over the moon. I was really, really happy. Those moments work really well.
So last question. Let's imagine there's a 12-year-old kid somewhere in Canada tonight watching TV, and he sees Brent Butt, the stand-up comedian, delivering his act. What do you hope that kid tells his mom or her mom?
If he wants to get into the business. If he or she wants to dive into the business, I would say to the 12-year-old, go for it. If that same person was 18, I'd say, don't get into the business.
That's it, that little window.
Because, and the reason I say that is a 12-year-old can be influenced beyond who he or she is, right? And I wouldn't want to crush that kid's dream. But by the time you're 18, you kind of got a sense of who you are. And I would tell anybody who's 18, don't even think about getting into show business. You're stupid to consider it. Don't even bother. Because there's going to be 1 out of 100 who says, screw you, fatty, I'm going to get into it no matter what you say. And beautiful, you belong here. The 99 who say, oh, okay, if you can not do it because somebody told you not to do it, you don't belong here. This business, it should be reserved for people who are going to do it no matter what anybody says because they have to do it. And so I always try and dissuade people from getting into the business because if they can be dissuaded, they don't belong here. Because that's what it's all, this whole business is have every day somebody saying, you suck, you stink, that was a terrible audition, that's horrible. You should only be here if all that stuff can bounce off you.
Well, I think maybe we should ask the audience at this point if they have any questions for Brent. I think there's a couple microphones coming out on either side of the aisles here, so feel free to approach the microphone. We'd love to hear what you think. Anyone? There's one over there. Hi there.
Hi. I was curious when you were talking about that you can go to a club and bomb. How do you come back from that? We all experience failures in our life. How do you deal with it?
You just kind of compartmentalize it a little bit. You got to put it in perspective, really. I think if I had bombed a lot in the beginning, it would have rattled me, and I might have a hard time bouncing back from it. But if you usually do well, and if it usually works, and one time it doesn't, you can kind of look at that as the anomaly and go, okay, that didn't work. There's probably a reason why. And I was always get kind of analytical and try and think, okay, what did I do wrong? What screwed up? But you know, if you do 8 or 9, if you bomb 8 or 9 times in a row, it's going to get less funny. It's really going to be like, oh, what the hell? Maybe I can't do this. But as long as bombing is the anomaly, then it's okay. Then it's just a matter of putting it in perspective. Look at the big picture. Say, I usually do well. Didn't do well tonight. As long as I do well again tomorrow, everything's okay.
Do you think a series of bombs can really be hard to climb out of? I imagine. Have you rutted for a few days in a row?
Not really bombing, but I mean, there are times, if I don't do stand-up for a long time because I'm in production or something, you get rusty. You get ring rust like a boxer, where you know what you're supposed to be doing. You know you're supposed to duck the punch, but it's coming that notion is an eighth of a second too late, and you're getting punched. And you know everything you're supposed to do, but the rhythm is off a little bit, just because you haven't done it enough. And so there could be a time, there has been times where after a long period of not doing stand-up where I start doing it again, and it's rough. But again, you just got to look at it for what it is and say, okay, this is, you know, I haven't been to the gym in a while. This is that first day back on the treadmill, and it's harder than it was when I was doing it every day.
Have to take a few extra hits.
Yeah, you got to get, and you know, just remember every time you get punched, a bit more of the ring rust gets knocked off.
Are there other questions from the audience? I'm wondering about
Anything tax related? Any,
math
financial
related.
planning?
Do you do your taxes? I think that was
No, I hire a professional. I'm all about hiring a pro, no matter what you're doing. Plumbing, no matter what it is, hire a pro. I don't like when people try to entertain themselves. I don't like that. Hire a pro. So
he's available. So you know, you're writing, you're directing, you're making films, making TV. Where does stand-up stand up and all that in the end?
I look at it as the core of everything. I would say if you boil everything else away, I'm a stand-up comic. That's what I feel. I feel like that's who I am. Everything else is what I do, and it's all an offshoot of who I am. I feel like I'm a guy who, you know, I'm at my most comfortable when I'm standing up in front of people trying to be funny. That's the part that makes the most sense to me. So that's who I am. It's the center of everything.
Brent Butt, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Brent Butt, ladies and gentlemen.